Hey, everybody, welcome to The Blacklist, the show where we interview the elite to see how they got there and basically to kind of showcase to the world, what steps you need to take in order to get there. So, right now we have John White. And for, people that don't know you, John, give yourself a brief introduction before we kind of dive into things.
Sure. Thanks, Ulysses. First off, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks so much for having me on. So, my name's John White. I live in Fort Collins, Colorado, with my two daughters and wife. And I am the founder of Social Marketing Solutions, or SMS for short. We are a marketing and PR agency, work with entrepreneurs, small business owners, and we help them build their brand. So we help them with their marketing, their content creation, social media presence, getting them booked on podcasts such
Yeah.
as this one, and getting them in the media so they can tell their story and show the world just how smart they are and all the cool stuff that they have going on. And been doing social marketing solutions for 7 years after a run as a Spanish teacher and then in the corporate world. So I'm on career number 3. I'm living proof that people can transition out of something they don't like into something they love.
Yep.
And on the personal side, a bit of a Mexican food aholic. Also like to play tennis, and I live in Colorado, so close to the mountains. Love to go hiking with my family.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I think, in today's day and age, I think it's only going to get bigger. But right now, there's so many people that are building personal brands, and I think they can see the benefit of that. It's like people want to connect with people, and they like the stories that come from that person. And, for example, people that I follow on social media is because I either look up to them or obviously I know them. But without that, I feel like it would just be bland, right? So you kind of help solidify that for a lot of your clientele. How does the first step look like to kind of identifying your personal brand and then kind of putting that out there?
Yeah, I think it's all about deciding that you want to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
And a lot of people they struggle with that step. They don't want to put themselves out there. Or they don't feel that they're interesting enough. They look at the top people out there that are have millions of followers, and they get they're afraid to get started, right? They have that imposter syndrome, which is so hard to overcome.
Yeah.
So I think the first step is literally just to get started. Even if you don't have like rock solid content yet, like with anything else, you have to start, and you have to put yourself out there. And it's a tough step to take because, like I said, there's that imposter syndrome. There's people that are so good at it already, and you're kind of afraid to put yourself out there with those people that are already,
Yep.
doing so well. So, my advice is to, don't wait for that perfect day to like, okay, this is the day that, I'm finally ready to start building my brand, because that's never going to happen. You just have to, bite the bullet and decide that you're going to put yourself out there and start creating content that shows your expertise, and really just go for it.
Yeah. And, for people that are like, on the fence, why is it important for them to actually go for it? Why can't they just, not do it at all and, just stick with their company brand or, kind of stay in the back end?
Sure. So I think, with today's business model, so many people are looking to connect on a human level with who they do business with.
That's true.
And, they've been advertised to from brands over and over, and to the point of ignasium that, they just, they put up a wall to that type of corporate advertising. And it's been done, for so many years and so long. Again, I think people are tired of that messaging. And I think the messaging that people relate to is other humans. And the more you can humanize yourself and create that, brand and personality for people to connect with, I think it just makes you easier to do business with, and it makes you easier to be found. I'm a great example of someone that had no personal brand just 7 years ago. Like, you could have Googled my name and scrolled like the first million pages on Google, and you would have found a lot of other John Whites, but you would have never found me. And so Again, if someone like me that can transition from a place in my career where I was really dreading to go to work every day, hated my job, it spread into my personal life and affected all my relationships, with my family, friends, and it wasn't until I'd really decided that I wanted to start building my own brand and my own company and have my own piece of the pie, if you will, that things started to change for me. I was always I was in the corporate world. I was working for the man. I was, kissing up to middle management, and I felt like I was in that constant hamster wheel. Like I would, take a few steps forward and then it would spin backwards, and just it never really got anywhere. Just kind of going round and round. And again, the main thing was that I was just unhappy with what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I decided to stop, like I said, building corporate brands and padding, middle management salaries, and go out and create something for myself. And so that was a huge turning point in my life and in my career when I decided to go out and do that for myself.
Yeah. And what's different now? Like, compare your life from back then to where you are right now. Because I know you work with some big high-level clientele, large following on Twitter, like, connections with a ton of people in the media. What's life like now?
Yeah. So, first off, I get to choose who I want to do business with. And I think that's really been a big, a huge swinging factor for me in terms of leveling up my career. And what I mean by that is when I was in the corporate world, I was always, kissing ass to these middle managers, and it was always a what have you done for me lately scenario. And
Yeah.
it was like that each and every month. I was in B2B sales, and you could crush it one month, and the next month, you're a zero. And you're constantly having to live in that world where it's each and every month there's just so much pressure, and dealing with these egos. And I thought that for the longest time that those people were better than me because they had a higher title than me, and I lived in that world trying to survive in that corporate environment, and had to put up with a lot of abuse from management. I had some really bad managers that were verbally abusive and really did everything they could to crush my confidence.
Yeah.
And what's different now is that I create my own narrative, and I work with who I want to work with. If there's a client that's not a good fit for me, I can just walk away from that situation. Whereas before I was kind of forced into fitting inside of a box in the corporate world, and
Right.
having to work for people that that were abusive to me and that didn't have my best interest in mind. And now I've done things like putting out my own content, and that went better than I could have ever imagined. I was one of the first bloggers on LinkedIn back in 2014, and I wrote a piece about my time in the corporate world called 7 Management Traits That Will Make All Your Employees Quit.
Yeah.
And that really, it kind of was the moment that everything came full circle for me. That article got well over 1 million views within 24 hours. And I was getting offers to write professionally, and people were wanting to know how much I charge for an article. And I didn't even have a rate at that point in time. So had to quickly, develop a company because I was getting requests for my services, and that was through just putting out content. And like I said, I wrote the one article, and that one article led to others. And then that's when the shift really kind of started to happen, is people started contacting me and offering me opportunities. Whereas in the past, it was always me reaching out, cold calling, cold emailing,
Yep.
trying to create opportunities for myself. It was all outbound generated, and really made that switch to an inbound model. Not that, I don't do outbound still, but it really was a monumental switch from, me being the one pitching to people approaching me because they saw my articles or they saw my tweets or posts. So that's really where the big change happened for me.
Yeah. And I always like to say that life for the influencer is easier because, like you said, right, you were in a position where once you had to kind of reach out for business, and then now you're in a position where business kind of comes to you. And that's just such a great place to be because the amount of effort that you put in to get to close a deal is minimal compared to somebody else that has no personal brand, that has no following, that has not contributed to the media, that has, no level of credibility like, the credibility that you have. So, what is your advice? I think it kind of goes back to our personal branding topic, where it's like it's very important now to set one up so that way they're interacting with people. So for companies that are on the fence that don't want to do that, this is exactly why, right? John White is living proof. I'm living proof. There's so many people that we probably know of that are living proof of that. And what about some of the high level stuff that you end up doing to kind of accelerate that process for them? Because sometimes personal branding can be a long journey, and I think that's natural. But what do you do to kind of expedite that process with your marketing and PR?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to point out is some people cringe at the term personal brand. They think that you have to be like some celebrity or influencer to have a personal brand, and I think that you have to get beyond that, and really personal brand is just a fancier term for reputation. And so
That's
when
true.
you start putting it in the terms that people can relate to, is okay. Well, you don't have a personal brand, but I bet you have a reputation, in your community, in your circle, from your past work. Everyone has a reputation, and so really, to have a personal brand, you don't need to be an influencer or a celebrity. Um, so I think just focusing on what I'm doing. How does it impact my circle? How does it impact my world? And how does that impact my reputation and people's desire to want to do business with me?
Yeah.
So I think you have to put out content to really make a name for yourself. And for me, it was blogging and writing. For other people, maybe it's TikToks, short videos. Maybe it's tweets. Maybe it's longer form video on YouTube. So I think really you got to develop a sweet spot for your content
Yeah.
and figure out what you're good at, and then start by putting out content that really is in the thought leadership lane. Start out with, hey, what am I good at? What do I know that other people will desire to know as well? What information do I have that adds value to my network? And when you start from that perspective in terms of what is my audience wanting to see from a guy like me, then you can start building your personal brand, your reputation, your value. So I think it's really important to be able to put out content and to do that on the regular.
Yeah. And when you mean by, do it on the regular, how often? Because I know, ton of people are going to say, I don't have time, or I need to be focusing on things that move the needle. But I think this is a long-term play that reaps benefits, down the road, a long time from now. So how often should they be putting content? You did a very good job of explaining what type of content, right? It's not necessarily about them. It's about the audience and what they want to see from someone like you or from you. So how often should they do it, and how do they determine if it's video, writing, blogging? Because there's so many ways to do it.
Yeah. A lot of people think there's this term omnipresence out there,
Yeah.
and that's a buzzword right now. And it kind of, means that you want to have a presence and be out there continuously, right? So that, there's no gaps in terms of the content that you're putting out there. But then people ask, well, what does that look like for me? Is that like daily? Is it 2 times a day, 3 times a day? Is it once a week? And I think that, everyone's a little bit different. And I think that you should go in your natural rhythm. Excuse me. And that takes time to develop. So I don't think you should, go and overextend yourself, right? Because then you're not really putting out quality content. You're just putting out content to put out content. So I think, everyone's natural rhythm is slightly different. And I think that you have to kind of figure that out for yourself. Now, the one thing I would caution people against is taking long breaks. You know, a lot of time I'll see people, they want to start a personal brand and then they go gangbuster on it and they're posting like 5 times a day for like 3 weeks. And then they get burnt out, you know, and they don't, then it's 6 months later, then they try again. And,
Yeah.
so there needs to be some consistency to it so that you're in front of your audience and they're not forgetting about you. So don't start and stop. Work to develop that natural rhythm so that you're able to put out content at your own pace that keeps you in front of an audience. And there's really 2 ways to put out content. One is to educate your audience. I mean, people come to the internet because they want to learn.
Yeah.
Or they want to be entertained. So
Yep.
what are you doing in your life that's interesting and that other people may find interesting? So, here I am today in Las Vegas at Blue Wire Studios. So definitely a post-worthy event for me, to post about. That's something that people might find interesting. So so you can entertain, you can educate, or you can make them laugh.
Right.
And those are kind of the 3 content pillars that really are the most effective out there.
Yeah. One question that I had is when you started writing articles, and you started getting offered to write at, massive publications, that was kind of your thing, right? Is blogging. How do you determine what, not just what the audience wants to hear, but at the same time, something that will go viral, like, your post that hit 1 million under 24 hours? Because some people might create content and it gets like 10 views, right? And they're continuing to create content that maybe is not engaging, that is just value, driven. But if it's only value driven and not entertaining, then, it might not get through to people. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you have to have a good mix of different types of content, and you got to experiment with different types of content to see what's going to work best for you. And you can't get discouraged by the low view count.
Yep.
You have to just learn from it and move on and get better at it. Even that 1 million view blog post I wrote 7 years ago, I look back at some of that content that was successful back then and kind of cringeworthy,
Yeah.
So I think you have to, again, I think people are waiting for that perfect moment to get started, that perfect piece of content. And I think you have to get started putting content out there, experimenting with it and seeing what's going to work for you. And sometimes the piece that you think is just going to go mega viral, this is the one and it's a flop. And others, you put out and it does exceedingly better than you could have ever imagined. So I think that, in addition to being entertaining, making people laugh and educating, I think people really like vulnerable. And if you can show a little bit of vulnerability, then I think you go a long way of resonating with your audience.
Yeah.
Because, the internet is so much glorifying people's lives. It's little snapshots of, things that maybe aren't their reality, and people see that and then they start having, they start comparing themselves to what they see on the internet. And that can be really damaging to people's, their mental health if they start doing that, if they go down that road.
Right.
So I think, you just have to keep it real, and you have to, do the best for yourself in terms of your own content. And like with anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So you got to find a way to get started, and you have to find a way to stay consistent at it. And if you can do that, then you'll find your groove.
Yeah. Well, John, we appreciate you. Where can people find you? And where are you at the most?
I'm on Twitter the most. So you can find me at Juan Blanco 76 on Twitter, and that's just John White in Spanish. For those of you that no hablan español.
Damn, you do a good job.
Yeah, thanks. I was an exchange student in Spain, and that's where I got that nickname.
Yeah.
But I'm also Juan Blanco 76 on Instagram too. So Twitter and Instagram, good place to find me.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, dude. I appreciate you being on the show. Looking forward to having you again.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you. He's not?